In my early 20s, I was very much interested in ghost hunting, especially with all the new and upcoming ghost hunting shows there were on TV. My favorite was All We Tap's Ghost Hunters, but then everything on that show started to feel very, very fake, and the two-head ghost hunters didn't seem at all interested in what they were doing anymore. During this period, I had visited Singapore to meet my long-distance girlfriend and a couple of other friends. We all shared an interest in the paranormal. They had told me an interesting story about the old Changi Hospital, how it was temporarily a major prison camp which was handled by the notorious Kempeitai, the Japanese military police, which also play the role of that of secret police, which reportedly used it as a torture center. This rumor was based on the unconfirmed claim that a particular small room with narrow windows served as the infamous torture chamber in the hospital. Thick chains were hung on the walls in the room, and there were 2 concrete stubs on the floor that were believed to be for some sort of torture device. I had the brilliant idea of going on a ghost hunt there. I mean, come on, there didn't seem to be a better location where we may experience a spirit than this. There were 3 of us, including my girlfriend, and we all had agreed to do this. We didn't have any real ghost hunting equipment, so it was all very amateur. At about 10 p.m., we had begun to make our way. Getting a taxi to take us to the old Changi Hospital proved to be difficult. We had to ask 4 different cabs, and they all kind of gave us a shocked or weird look and flat out said no. The 5th one finally agreed, and while on the way there, I tried to ask him if he knew about the location. He said he knew where it was. I asked if he has heard about any weird things that would happen there, and he casually replied he really didn't know anything about the area. I guess that is why he agreed to take us. When we reach our destination, the scene leading up to the hospital is already very creepy. You have to walk up a hill of sorts, and it was literally pitch black. Even though the main road that we were dropped off on was well and fully lit, once you walk up the hill about 30 meters, it is pitch black, and I mean you can no longer see the lights from the main road. My girlfriend decided she didn't want to go and would wait for us in the safety of the lights of the main road. She would be safe there since there was a military barrack nearby and it was a fairly busy road. My friend and I went on ahead. We walked up the pitch black hill until we reached the main gate of the hospital. This place looked creepy as hell in the dark. I recommend Googling some photos of the hospital. It really wasn't a task to get past that gate at all, though. We literally just stepped over some metal chains that were drawn across the open gate, and we were in. We just stood there for a while, getting used to the creepy feeling and planning where we should start. A few times we had heard noises coming from the surrounding forested area, and trying not to panic, we assured ourselves those were just animals walking around. After a while, we decided to head towards the right corridor and up a floor. The corridor was really narrow, and we had to walk in a single file to be comfortable. We had opened the doors to several rooms just to check them out, and one room in particular sort of stood out. It had holes on the walls all over the room. This is where my friend recalled that he heard Japanese secret had regularly executed many prisoners of war at a time by lining them up in a room and opening fire. This must have been that very room. I wanted to do some experiments in there, and all we had was the voice recorder on our phone. So I decided to sit in there alone and ask some questions to see if we could possibly get any answers. I walked over to the center of the room, and my friend waited outside for me. He closed the doors and pulled out my phone and was happy that I had a little light from it as I did this. I started the audio recorder on my phone and started asking questions. Is there anyone in the room with me? Can you make yourself known? Are you one of the tortured prisoner of war? Were you killed in this room? Nothing happened for about a minute. Then just as I was about to ask another question, I hear pop on the wall. I jumped and turned to look around and just started for the door where my friend was. I'm walking very fast, and after my 3rd step, pop pop continuously on the walls all around me. Just like bullet shellings hitting the walls and floor. I bolted out as fast as I could, pushed the door, and nearly pushing my friend over the corridor as I just ran past him. I yelled, "Run," as I did, and he ran behind me and kept up. I didn't stop until we reached the bottom, the main road where safety of the lights are, and where my girlfriend was sitting, gabbing away on the phone with her friend. Once I reached her, I stopped and caught my breath. I had explained what had happened and proceeded to play the recording I had on my phone. Strangely enough, all I got was static. From start to beginning, you couldn't even hear my first few questions. You couldn't even hear me scream "run," which it should have caught because I didn't think to stop the recording until I reached the bottom of that pitch-dark hill. What you could hear was towards the end, where suddenly the static disappears and you hear my friend and I obviously running down the hill. Almost as if it only started recording the moment we got out of the hospital's main gate. It was quite the experience for me, and since then I have become a full believer. I've always had a weak heart. Not just physically, I've always been afraid of my own shadow. It was unsurprising when the doctors told me my heart murmur wasn't just a heart murmur. A year of tests, a year of therapy, constant trips to the hospital, and I was finally told that it had all been for nothing. My poor weak heart wouldn't last till Christmas. It's a strange thing being told that you're dying. I didn't come to terms with it at first. I drank and I spent my money. I did reckless, stupid things because I was so damn scared. Then I got the news that a young woman called Laura had been declared brain dead and that I, the lucky chosen one, would be getting a brand new heart a week later. I drove to the hospital slowly, carefully, and readied myself for the ordeal that was to come. As I was laying in bed on the last night, the thought of Laura swirled around in my head, and it wouldn't leave me alone. It was like her name was in flashing lights every time I closed my eyes. It was wrong, I know it was, but I had to see the woman who was giving me her heart. It didn't feel right not to put a face to the one who was saving my life. I knew her name, I knew what ward she was staying on. I knew her name, I knew what ward she was staying on. I had overheard the two nurses discussing it. I wandered down the meandering hallways until I found what I was looking for, taking my time, making sure I didn't miss any name. I guess I had time on my hands now. In the second to last room, she lay in bed. A woman sat on the bed next to her holding her hand, and my own weak heart stuttered. "Excuse me." I had no idea what to say to her. "I'm Jenna. I'm the person. I'm having surgery tomorrow," and what I assumed was Laura's mother stood up, and I could tell from the look in her eye that she knew who I was. "Thank you for visiting. I know it's strange, but a part of her is going to be living on in you. I wanted to meet you." I stood there helpless and lost for words. Laura's mother beckoned me over. "Please," she said, "don't feel uncomfortable." It's what she would have wanted. I sat on the chair next to Laura. "How did she—" I broke off. It was too awful to ask. Laura's mother gave me a thin smile. She was a care worker, looked after battered wives, abused women. Last month she met a guy and, well, I suppose years of training can't help you when you're in love. She ignored the warning signs, and he killed her. She dedicated her life to those who needed her. Laura's mother looked down. I don't know why I did it, but I reached over and held Laura's hand. I squeezed it. "I'm so sorry. I had a boyfriend once who... he was like that too. Someone like Laura convinced me to leave." Laura's mother gave me another half-smile. I could see the tears in her eyes. Then Laura squeezed my hand. Tightly. She gripped me so hard that her fingernails dug into my skin. I recoiled, a look of horror on my face. Laura's mother looked at me calmly. She squeezes my hand sometimes as well. I think the doctors called it muscle spasms. Either way. There's none of Laura left in there anymore. I looked at the small crescent moons that had just started to bleed on the palm of my hand. The surgery went perfectly. I was wheeled to the recovery suite after it was over and done with, the raised wound on my chest covered by gauze. It was better if I didn't see it, I thought. I didn't need any more heart issues. I spent the first day doped up on the pain medication, eating only a little and sitting up maybe 2 times. It was a long process, they reassured me. Laura's mother came to visit me the day before I was due to leave. Her calm demeanor hadn't wavered, but I could see that she was suffering. She looked 10 years older, and her hand shook when she gave me a hug. "When are you going home?" "Tomorrow," I told her. "Please come visit whenever you want." I started to jot down my address for her when out of the corner of my eye, a flash of blonde disappeared through the doorway. The same brilliant blonde as Laura's hair. "Ow!" I cried out suddenly. It felt like someone had sharply squeezed my hand so hard it had almost crushed the bones. Laura's mother rushed to my side, a look of concern in her eyes. "What's wrong?" "Is it your heart?" She stumbled over the last words, coming to terms with what she had said. I tried to reassure her and said I'd let the doctors know, and she left with a look of worry on her face. When I looked down, a new set of crescent fingernail marks were below the ones that Laura's had made. 10 identical bleeding smiles. The taxi ride home was short, and before I knew it, I was back in my own flat. It felt strange to try and slot back into where I had left off. My life had been almost over the last time I had been here. I looked over the mess and the cardboard boxes, the remnants of one night where I had tearfully tried to pack and store my belongings so my parents wouldn't have to do it when I died. Laura's heart beat so strongly it felt like it would come out of my chest. It did this all the time, and I realized this was what a healthy heart must feel like. So why couldn't I shake my feeling of unease? That night, I had a dream. Laura was in her hospital bed, but her mother was gone. I could hear my heart, Laura's heart, beating in my eardrums so loudly it was painful. I tried to cover them, but my hands were pinned to my sides. Some unexplainable force was moving me towards the motionless figure of Laura on the bed. Her lips were blue, and the window had come open, whipping her blonde hair around her face. I was almost on top of her when her eyes flew open. They were milky white, the eyes of someone dead. "Get out!" she rasped, her voice guttural. I could hear the heartbeat faster and faster, drumming until I thought I couldn't take it anymore. Then I woke up. The sound had been real. Laura's heart was so loud it felt like it would rupture my eardrums, and I screamed in agony, trying to cover my ears. It was useless. It was coming from some deep place inside me. I could feel it reverberating around the hollows of my chest. I stumbled out of bed, gasping for air, and tried to find my phone. I needed to call someone, anyone, an ambulance or my mom. Anyone that would pick up, "Get out." It was a faint whisper over the hammering thumps of Laura's heart, a low guttural voice that sounded like it had been made by an animal, and I crawled to the door, down the hallway, choking on my screams for help. My neighbor opened the door, his eyes as wide as saucers at the sight of me on the floor, clutching my chest. He drove me to hospital as I cried in the passenger seat of his car. After about 50 different checkups, the doctors told me that absolutely nothing was wrong with me. They told me my heart was regular, my blood pressure was normal, and that everything was going just swimmingly. I stood in the waiting area, wallowing in my shame and frustration. That heart didn't belong to me. My phone buzzed on the counter, an unknown number. Great. That was all I needed. More unexplained, scary things, like a stranger on the end of the phone. My voice sounded small on the line. "Hello? Hello? Good morning. This is the Thames Valley Police. We've called to report an incident that occurred in your flat at around 1:30 a.m. today." I felt a wave of embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. I recently had surgery and I wasn't feeling well. I had to have my neighbor drive me to the hospital, and I think I panicked a little in the hallway before I left." There was a small silence on the other end of the phone. "I'm afraid this is something you might want to be sitting down for." I felt Laura's heartbeat strong and calm. There was an incident of forced entry by Mr. Samuel Matthews. According to our police records, he's your ex-partner, and you filed a restraining order against him in September 2017. My blood ran cold. I did. He's in police custody. We found an automatic weapon on him, and we believe he had the intent to harm you. We have an officer currently stationed at your flat who can fill you in depending on how long your hospital stay will be. I thanked him and hung up the phone. For a moment, I leant against the wall, the horror slowly spreading over me. If I had been in my flat 10 minutes later, he would have found me. Laura's heartbeats filled my ears again, but now they were gentle, calming. Her mother said she dedicated every part of her to helping those who needed it. I put both my hands on my chest, overwhelmed by my own gratitude, and listened to Laura. I'm a PA, which means production assistant. It sounds fancier than it actually is. Pretty much, you watch one thing for 12, 15 hours to make sure nothing gets stolen. Like a generator which someone can easily hook up to their truck and drive off with it. Or you're watching an unlocked door so no one unauthorized comes in. Security is a better term, but without credentials training. Just stand there, look pretty, and hope no weirdos come your way. Or you're fucked. I would be anyways. One day I was at Riverview Mental Hospital in Coquitlam, BC. For those who don't know, it's or was a mental institution. It has been shut down for a decent number of years now. A lot of movies and TV productions use the space for filming. You've probably heard of Supernatural, X-Files, Smallville, The Magicians, etc. Anyways, I was posted out back of East Lawn Building, watching the back entrance, and also the generator. The crew had already moved down to the cafeteria to film there, but someone needed to stay up here to keep watching. I pulled the short straw. Even though Riverview is a good distance away from other people, there was still a section of Riverview open for addicts in recovery. So we still need to keep watch to ensure no one wanders in the building. The cafeteria was a bit down from the East Lawn Building, and my walkie was just out of range. I had to pee really badly and hoped someone was coming soon to relieve me. Fuck it, I said. I hadn't seen a soul in sight and decided to run in and quickly use the bathroom. It was just inside the doors, past the eerie, empty kitchen. It felt so good to relieve my bladder. On my way back out, I saw a dark figure from the corner of my eye in the kitchen. I turned my head to look, but no one was there. "Hello," I said, wondering if it was someone from set decoration coming to clean some stuff up. No one responded, so I kept walking towards the doors. I then heard shuffling of footsteps, which sounded like it was right behind me. I gasped and turned around faster than my brain could think twice. Of course, no one there. Okay, obviously you won't respond, but I'm gonna have to ask you to leave before I call security, hoping he or she won't catch my bluff that my radio was out of range. If you're lost, just follow my voice. I'm close to the exit. If it were me and I didn't know where the bathroom was, I'd get lost, too. I saw a boy, maybe 7, poke his head out from behind the counter. I was shocked to see someone so young here, maybe visiting someone and wandered off. "He there, are you lost?" He shook his head and fully came out from behind the counter. "Where is your family or guardian?" He then shrugged and started walking towards me. I held my hand out to him. "Come on, we'll go outside and I'll call for help." Or try to... I could see him more clear now that he was approaching sunlight. He looked very pale, as if he hadn't seen the light of day in months. The skin around his eyes were a dark color, and his lips were bluish. It was weird, but it was a cold day. His shirt was a dark gray and his slacks looked worn. Poor kid. He looked at me weird, his eyebrows forwarding, and he winced his eyes. He looked mad. I felt a bit confused. He reached his hand out for mine and he said, "Follow my voice." It wasn't his voice, though. It was mine coming out of his mouth. I froze in fear, watching him get closer. Why couldn't I move? "Angela," said a sharp voice from the door. I snapped out of it and turned towards my manager. He looked disappointed. Is your radio dead or something? I looked down to see the boy, but he wasn't there. I started looking around me frantically. What are you doing? He said, now irritated. Where did he go? I said surprisingly loud. Who? Still irritated. The boy? The boy that was right here. I pointed beside me. There was no one there. Anyways, listen, I was coming to give you a break, but it looks like you already had one. I looked at him, and I could tell he saw the fear in my eyes. His facial expressions relaxed, and he said, let's go. They've wrapped out at the cafeteria. We can take it from here. Security will watch this post. You can go home. You look tired. My fear turned to anger as if he didn't believe me. I stormed off toward my car and left, hands still shaking. Later that night, I tried to look up young boys who died in the hospital, but came to a dead end. I decided to give up and go to bed. The next morning, I saw I had a missed phone call from Earl, the nighttime supervisor. He left a voicemail and I listened to it. Listen, Angela, whatever game you're playing, you need to stop. In the background of the message, I heard me saying, follow my voice. I was very confused and panicked. I rushed to get to Riverview. When I got there, there were cops surrounding the East Lawn back entrance, my post. I could hear sobs from my crew and policemen asking people questions. Isn't it ironic, said one cop. A guy dies of a heart attack in a hospital, but no one can help. He shook his head. I found my manager and asked him what happened. Earl, he died last night from a heart attack. He was only 45, he said, very saddened. I looked over the crew towards the entrance to the building. There, at the door, stood the boy. My heart froze. He mouthed, follow my voice, and smiled. An unearthly smile, like he had no cheekbones. The corner of his mouth almost reached his ears. He then slowly walked inside and disappeared. I never went back to Riverview. In fact, I'm no longer a pa.